introduction there. And good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful sunny day today. So based on our topic, hopefully everyone can get outside and enjoy one of our parks or a walk on your own or with someone else, just to enjoy some time outdoors. But we're really thrilled this morning to have Lisa King and Dan Rice with us this morning. You may know that Lisa was appointed the Executive Director of Summit Metroparks in September of 2015. And she is the first woman to ever hold that position. So, and we know Lisa's just done a fantastic job managing our entire park system. Lisa's been with the park since 1998 and also had a role as their chief landscape architect, and also was responsible for planning and development. And we also have Dan Rice with us this morning. Dan is president and CEO of Ohio and Erie Canalway Coalition. Dan's been there since 1994, and over that time has worked with over 100 community partners, raised over $30 million, and has just done a fabulous way leading that organization to preserve historic structures. We have the 101-mile towpath trail that many of us enjoy, and just both are just huge treasures to our community. And I think all of us have an even greater appreciation. We've always loved those resources, but over the last several weeks, I know all of us and thousands more have even probably gained a greater appreciation for those resources. So we've asked Dan and Lisa both to be with us today. We're going to try a little different format with two featured guests. And we're going to begin by asking Dan and Lisa just to share some thoughts on renewal. We know that as leaders, it's important for us just to step back from leading, and certainly in times of crisis and stress, we have to step away from those responsibilities and the stress to renew so that we can go back and lead effectively. So we're going to start and ask Dan and Lisa just to share some thoughts on how each of you renew mind, body, soul, spirit, what you do to renew yourself. And if you could share some thoughts, and then we're going to let the two of you ask each other some questions, and we'll have that conversation between the two of you, and then Jeremy and I will step back in and cue some things up. As Jeremy indicated, if any of you have questions for Lisa and Dan, feel free to use the chat feature, and we'll pose those questions as well. So Dan and Lisa, thanks again, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Barry. And I'll let Lisa go ahead and go first with the how you renew, because it's probably maybe similar, actually. Probably, Lisa?
Yeah, I think so. Dan and I are used to tag teaming speaking engagements. We've done it many times over the years, and when we do something like this, it's we know each other pretty well. So I was thinking about that myself, and the renewal for me, it's broader than that. As I've kind of come through the ranks with the Metroparks and using the parks in different ways, I thought, well, I not only use it for renewal, because a walk in the park is really, it's more of a recharge and a renewal, but I've also used it, I've used the parks for fitness after I've had my kids. I've used it for rehab after I had back surgery. And I've used it to work my way through probably the hardest emotion we deal with, which is grief. And lost my father almost 20 years ago now, and that was unexpected. And then about 10 years ago, my mother, which was more of a long, drawn-out process. And both of those are, hard in different ways. And I really found like the taking a hike, taking a walk, getting that fresh air, listening to the sounds, all of those things are so good for you. That really moved me in a healthy way through that whole grief process. So, renewal that I get from nature is many, many fold for me. So, we're going to talk about later, maybe, how do you deal with stress? And for me, if I don't reach for fresh air, and I find that even in the winter, if I'm going to the window because I want to open it, I know that that's my trigger. I just need to step outside, get a little fresh air, and I suddenly feel better. So, renewal has lots of meanings for me. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I would really, to build on what the great comments that Lisa had there, I agree 100%. I mean, the really three ways in which I really can refuel and recharge. First of all is spending time with our family. And obviously during this period, we're all spending a lot of quality time together. And our daughter is, Rachel is very much still into experimenting regarding making different foods. And so spending time with the family is really important. I also try to read as much as I can because I think that you can get inspiration from reading about different people's experiences. It helps to remind you that we're not in this alone, and quite frankly that there are people who've gone through much more challenging times than I've ever gone through. And so what can I learn from that? What can I take away from that? I've read a lot of the leadership books. I know, Bill, your books have been very inspirational to me, as well as other historical books. And then this time of year is particularly special. I mean, I love all the seasons. I know that you know, sometimes we tend to dread snow in April, and I'm one of those people, quite frankly. But spending time outside at Summit Lake. I was down there last week. We're doing some work at Summit Lake and watching the ospreys build their nest, hearing the red-winged blackbirds, smelling a spring rainstorm come through. To me, those are things that are they remind me of the cycles of life, and that's something that I can look forward to. And quite frankly, I love fall. I love the smell of the fall. I love when leaves are falling, and it's that cycle of life that really reminds me of the renewal and of our small place in that. And that's actually where I find solace, and I also am able to renew.
Yeah, that's great, Dan. It's funny, you mentioned the sounds of nature. Those are the sounds and the smells, you know, all the when it really activates all the senses. You know, the sound of the crunching leaves under your feet in the fall. I love that about the fall hiking spree. Tiny little plug there. We're hoping we can do that again. You know, just the sound of rain has always been my favorite way to fall asleep. So, you know, the good Lord has given us many, many things to enjoy about nature.
And as been said previously, I mean, I think now more than ever, people are out there utilizing our trails and parks and open spaces. And I think it really gives us a really strong appreciation for how blessed and fortunate we are here in Akron and Summit County. And Lisa is probably way too modest, but I'm not. We've got a really important issue on the ballot in less than a week. So I am not going to be objective about this at all. I'm very biased. We have one of the best metropolitan park agencies in the state of Ohio. And so I urge you, there's only one right vote here, and that's to vote yes. And please tell all your friends and families that voted for it, because it's a really important ballot initiative. And that's why we have the great resources we do. And so our park systems are in great hands. So please, please vote yes. How'd I do, Lisa?
Thank you, Dan. I need to hire you.
No. I mean, I've been a huge fan of the system for many years, and it's such an honor to work with Lisa, to be the first female director. It's been a long time in coming. As a matter of fact, it was interesting. I was talking with Nancy where I was going down my ballot last night, and I'm really proud that we have a lot of elected officials and women in places of influence and leadership. And that's not a mistake by any stretch of the imagination. So Lisa's definitely a great example of that.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so you're worrying me a little bit. You're filling out your ballot. You know, the clock's ticking, Dan.
Well, so speaking of that, we've had just a tremendous influx of users to our park systems. And let's just be honest. I mean, Lisa, if you could kind of talk a little bit about the stress that puts on the system, in that, you know, I think it was mentioned earlier, a little frustration because people who are regulars to the park system are now encountering new visitors. And so the question is really twofold. One, how are you guys managing that stress on the system? Because there was a discussion, I think you and I were involved with about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the governor was considering shutting down some of our park systems, which I think would have been such a huge mistake. And so then also, how might you turn those new users into stewards?
Oh, those are great questions that follow on one to the other. So, you know, when the stay-at-home order came down, we were caught a little by surprise by this huge surge of people to the parks. And it took us a few days to kind of get our arms around why, the visitation is way beyond what we see at this time of year. We were getting some comments about why aren't people moving over and all that. And the comments were leading us to realizing that we had new park users in our parks. What's not to love about that? We were so thrilled about that. We come to realize, all right, so maybe we need to do, take a look at our marketing, retool some things very quickly. Let's get some basic trail etiquette out there for those new users so they, kind of understand what the vibe is out there in the park and how you work with other people on the trail. And so really our marketing kind of started over at the stay at home, and we just customized our marketing as we were seeing what was happening in the parks. So, the stress on the system was, we typically have X number at certain parks at this time of year. Now we have more than double. So it was interesting. We came across some cell phone coverage that I think it was done by maybe T-Mobile or maybe it was Google. There were movements in different categories. And of course you were seeing retail was, their numbers were down. Parks and open spaces were way up. And for our county, we were tracking at 139%. So we said, yep, that pretty much matches what we see there. So there's a great network of the park directors in Ohio meet or talk on a very regular basis. And at this point, we're actually talking once a week. It's a Zoom call just like this. And we're comparing notes and seeing what practices are working best so that nobody has to invent the wheel. So some things we've done, at our very high traffic park, our most visited park is Gorge and Sand Run. Gorge was getting overrun. We had people that were double parking, and immediately we realized that we have to do something here. So we closed half of that parking lot just to reduce the number of visitors in the park at a time. That didn't go over well the first couple of days, but then people started to understand why, and they were getting a better park experience without it being so overrun. The people that were walking in were continuing to do so, but that helped us manage it better. We're doing some overtime with our rangers to kind of help, tell the story and, remind people to observe their 6-foot distance. We closed those gathering areas where people couldn't be far enough apart. So really we shifted gears and went directly into, we need to get the right messaging out. Mm-hmm. So our marketing team is not big, but they're pretty mighty, 2-3 of them handling all of that on our social media. Other things that we did, it was kind of a sneaky thing, but we put signs on our restrooms that said for emergency use only, because we knew we only had the capacity to do a thorough cleaning once a day, and we do that first thing in the morning. Well, that reduced the use, which is kind of what we were after. So, just by way of putting a little sign up there that reminded people, do you really need to do this now, or can it wait till you get home? It helped us manage it better. So it's one of those things you have to think about. But, I think that overall, we ramped up very quickly to see what was going on. We tried to, manage situations that might have been a problem so that people can we want them coming. We want them out here. And, hopefully they're leaving with all of those, feeling calmer, all of those benefits that you get from being in nature. They've had a good time. They've enjoyed themselves, heard and seen some beautiful things, and go home feeling a little less stressed, a little more relaxed. So thank you for the question, Dan. That's it was a learning, sort of a vertical curve of learning how to deal with a surge. I think at this point we're seeing a little more of an average now, which we're thankful for.
Yeah, because it's really a stress. But the one thing I picked up on your comments, or Lisa, is adaptability is the name of the game. It
definitely is. So I want to ask you, Dan. You and I think, share a common thread that we like to be helpers. Mm-hmm. If somebody asks me for help, I'm doing it. I'm going to figure out how to do it. Well, I love that, you're right there near the hospital, and you had this heart to want to help our front line. Do you want to talk a little bit about something that you've got going that I think is brilliant?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for that lead in there. And Lisa's absolutely correct. We're trying to think of ways in which we can show our appreciation and gratitude to our essential workers, and very specifically our hospital and healthcare workers. And so we came up with this idea, and I think it's being done all across the country. It's called Messages of Hope and Inspiration, in which we basically went out to the general public and said, if you would like to share your favorite quote or a drawing or a message to our frontline workers, our essential workers, our healthcare workers, we will get those signs printed and we will place them along the Ohio and Erie Canal Towpath Trail. And we saw the advantage of this was that obviously people are out there using the trails. It's a great way to show our appreciation, gratitude to our healthcare workers, our essential workers. And I'm really pleased to say that we debuted it last week. We already have 37 signs. I just saw the proof of that this morning. And those signs will be printed and they will be installed this weekend. And we're hopeful that this is something that really picks up steam and that people share their messages of hope and inspiration, because now more than ever, we really need to stick together. We really need to keep a positive attitude, because we're in this for the long haul. And our essential workers, our healthcare workers, they are truly on the front lines. They are making sacrifices, and their families are making sacrifices so that we can stay safe. So the more that we can show our gratitude and appreciation to our essential workers, our healthcare workers, we want to be able to do it. And then the second component of this is we're doing a program called Art in the Commons. We're asking artists, about 10 different artists. Many of you folks may have seen the wonderful photographs that Shane Wynn installed along the Towpath Trail on the State Route 59 bridge or down at Summit Lake. They've been absolutely beautiful. Well, we're going to install 10 pieces of that. Again, these are going to be very large pieces, 4x8, 4x6 actually, pieces of artwork. And we've already actually received about 3 or 4 of those pieces of artwork already. And so to really build on what Lisa was saying, all we're really trying to do is remain relevant and adaptable, because we recognize as a nonprofit, we have to find new ways of raising money. We need to find new ways of being relevant. Last week, for instance, we did this entire week, we're doing a DIY cleanup. So if you happen to be out there walking the Towpath Trail, we're encouraging people to take a plastic bag and wear gloves. Obviously, don't pick up anything that looks suspicious, but if you see litter, pick it up and put it in a bag. We did a DIY friends and family cleanup at at Summit Lake last week, Bill, and we had about 17 families come out. They stayed 6 feet apart. They all had on their handy dandy mask, although you can't see my eyes here. There we go. It actually, if you can see, it actually has sections of the trail on there. But we're just trying to come up with ways in which we can be relevant and adaptable, because we have valuable work we have to continue to do. We're still building sections of the Towpath Trail. We're still maintaining. We're still activating. And we've got a lot of plans for Summit Lake, really, with the Bill's leadership. And so we're just really trying to be as creative as we can. And so those are just some examples. So thank you so much for letting me share that, Lisa.
Absolutely. I love that idea. We kicked off something just yesterday too. We're partnering with Probate Court to do a little support effort for our seniors. Seniors that are living in congregate homes, either assisted living or nursing facilities. They must stay in their rooms, and of course they can't get visitors, and they're those that have been used to gathering together for meals or social events, they can't do that currently. So I've sent out to all of our employees, and we've got 170 employees throughout the Park District, that if they or their children or their friends and family would like to do cards, we're looking for colorful cards with a positive note to send to our seniors. So it's a big effort. There we have a lot of seniors in our county. We want to try to spread this effort. So we just rolled that out yesterday. So anybody that would like to do a card, we'll gather them up. They can come here to my office if possible. And by June 1st, we'd like to just give them a big box of cards, and they're going to do the distribution. So thought I'd just roll that out there in case anybody has a little extra time on their hands.
That's great. Thanks, Dan and Lisa, for just sharing how you're being creative at this time and just finding other ways to serve the community. And I heard one of you use the term "your helpers," and you really are the example of what helpers really are. Dan, when we started, you mentioned that you're a reader and that you like to read to renew. just curious if each of you would share something you've read, an article, a book, anything that's spoken to you as we think about renewal, nature. So maybe you can share some of those thoughts with us.
Well, in addition to, Bill's great leadership book, I got to give that a plug in because he's done a wonderful job of articulating, characteristics of leadership and how to grow and develop. There's two in particular, and I do have props actually here. One does relate to nature. Lisa and I were talking about this. We have a lot of good shared interests, but it's Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv. It is, actually that's backwards. Sorry about that. So anyway, Richard Louv, Last Child in the Woods. Richard does a wonderful job of talking about the restorative healing powers of nature and how it really helps us from an emotional, psychological, and physical perspective. In many ways, it actually made me sad in a lot of ways that reading the book, I recalled how as a youth, I would go out into the woods, in the fields, and I would literally be gone all day long. I'd be out there, imagining things, building dams, building forts, and my parents just trusted that I was safe. And that's really what's missing, I think, in today's society is that kids are having the opportunity to go out in the woods and just explore. Go down to a sand run and walk, not necessarily on the paved section, but walk on those hills and just imagine, the animals that live there and seeing nature and experiencing nature. So that's one of the books. The other book that I really like, and I apologize, it's going to be backwards on the screen, but this is, I think, really powerful in this time. It's called The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. Many folks are probably very familiar with this one. Randy, sadly, was a professor at Carnegie Mellon who had terminal cancer. And his book actually in video went viral. And it really is just a collection of his messages about how he has experienced life and his pearls of wisdom. And there's two, it's a very easy read. They're very short vignettes. And there's really two passages that really stand out, I think, especially for these times. And that is one, we have a choice to either be a Tigger or an Eeyore. And I love that analogy because we all, quite frankly, experience this. There are days when we feel like we're the Eeyore. There's days when we feel like we're Tigger. But his message is he'd much rather be a Tigger than an Eeyore. And then the other passage I really particularly like was it talks about romancing the wall. And that is, as we all know, life is going to throw all sorts of challenges at you, whether it's a personal situation, professional, and the point is not that the wall exists. The point is you have to romance the wall. You have to love the wall. And somehow you have to find a way to go through the wall, around the wall, under the wall, over the wall. And it's all about determination and perseverance. And I think in these trying times, I think now more than ever, we need to be continually reminded that, we're going to get through this, but we just have to be creative about how we can get through it. It doesn't matter if, it's just a matter of when. So those are two books in particular, Barry, that I find very inspirational.
So I've got some favorites in different categories, and so one of them, my favorite leadership books is a very, very easy read, and it's Lincoln on Leadership. And so, it brings in that historical perspective, but is very, very relevant in today's times. So it was one of my favorite things that I read that resonated with me was, he would, if he had to write a letter that had a focus on it that was either he needed to give bad news or he had to discipline someone, he would write the letter and he would put it in a drawer, and then he would come back to it the next day. And I find myself sometimes, drafting in today's times an email, and then I put it in the draft, and I like to do the same thing. It's just ruminate on it, or actually put it out of my mind and reread it with fresh eyes and go, yeah, maybe I don't want to say that. I'm going to change that. That needs to come across better, or some such thing. So I always like that tiny little nugget that really resonated with me. But there's a lot of great things in that book, and you could read it in a night or two. It's a very short read. In terms of nature, I'm going to last talk about the one that Dan mentioned, which was The Last Child in the Woods. But first, I'm kind of geeky about scientific information. I like that. I like numbers. I like data. And I really was intrigued by Janine Benyus. And she is really the person that brought forward the idea of biomimicry. And biomimicry is just absolutely fascinates me. So basically anything I get my hands on to read about that. Biomimicry is really taking those nature systems and applying them to manufacturing or business, or basically looking to nature for the answers on how to or why to do things. And I just love anything in that realm. So lastly, on this, on the book that Dan mentioned, This Last Child in the Woods, when my son was in second grade, a friend of mine that worked here at the park, she's no longer working here, she gave me that book because she recognized how helpful it would be to me as I was sharing with her how energetic my son was, and that I felt that I couldn't keep up and we were having a hard time with him focusing. Had him tested, and he was a very, very big H in ADHD. So he was very, very hyper. And, I read that book and it immediately focused me on more. We need to get outside some more. And it was the natural medicine that he needed. So, we were not able to do it daily. Certainly, when a child's in school, you're pretty much on their schedule. So we went as often as we could, but I always noticed such a difference. And then, of course, I think that created, another land steward, because he loved being out there. He loved, hiking and understanding and, what it was all about. He loved the sounds. So I was able to make a little steward of nature just by virtue of me understanding it was going to help him focus. And I didn't even have to talk about it. It just happened naturally. Fast forward to the work that we're doing at Summit Lake, we discovered when we started our pop-up nature center in the Reach Center, there were classes in there that wanted to partake of what we had to offer in that little pop-up center. And one of them was a GED class. So this was very early on. And Demetrius, who was our staff person there, kind of getting it off the ground, worked with the teacher of the GED class. And she said, what, can we have your class for a few minutes before you start every day? And she hem-hawed a little and reluctantly kind of gave the students to Demetrius, and they would go out and do a 10 or 15 minute hike, talk about nature a little bit, take binoculars. And the teacher within a day or two came back and said, I don't understand what's going on here, but they are so focused and more productive when they've spent the few minutes with you before they sit down. I want to keep doing this. Can we do this every day? And that's the proof right there. I mean, that's the things that these studies are showing us. And we had just a little pilot project of our own. So, nature's healing and focusing power is just amazing to me. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, and thank you both. There was a quick question, Lisa, if you could repeat the name of the book and author on biomimicry.
Well, let's see. I think the book is just biomimicry, but
okay.
So the woman is Janine Benyus. So it's sort of like it sounds, Benyus.
Okay.
And if you Google her, you'll find all kind of great things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to believe, and we keep saying this each week, just how quick the time goes. So we'll have to begin to wrap up here. And so just want to say thank you from all of us to the two of you, again, just for your leadership in the community, for the ways that you are creatively engaging folks and safely also doing that through adaptability. And just as Barry mentioned, that heart to be helpers to so many. And we just want to remind everyone that if you have to drop off the call, we are going to have some time for breakout groups, but we will be back here next week with Nicole Mullet from Arts Now, and even some of the stuff you heard today about just leading, fostering creativity as a leader, and what that looks like and the importance of that in our leadership. But as we prepare to sign off quickly, Dan and Lisa, I want to give each of you just a 30-second opportunity perhaps to share, how can folks support you in your work? I know Mark Auburn asked a question about just, some of the funding and ways people can, continue to support what the two of you are doing. Obviously, we talked about putting in that vote and everything, but 30 seconds each, just other ways folks can support you and your work.
Go ahead, Dan.
I appreciate that, Jeremy, and thank you, Lisa, because I apologize, Mark, I just saw your comment there in the chat thing. I'm just getting used to this Zoom stuff, so I apologize.
Me too.
And I really appreciate Mark asking that question about how people can support us and how we're funded, because we're a little bit unique in the sense that about 60 to 70% of our funding is actually from individuals, events, and programs. And so we are greatly impacted by this situation. We're just not able, we're not sure if we're going to be able to do the Canalway Captain's Ball. We're not sure we're being able to do big events. We're still trying to see if we can do the Topaz Century Ride. So we're just going to have to get really creative. And so if people are able and willing to support our mission, because the work still goes on, the best way they can support us right now, if they're not a member, please consider joining as a member. You can certainly go to our website at ohioeriecanal.org. And if you just want to make a general donation, that would be greatly appreciated. But like I said, we're going to try to continue with our canal cleanups. Those obviously need funding because we need supplies like hand sanitizers. We may actually look at purchasing masks for people. We're just going to try to be as creative as possible in order to raise money. But because we rely so much upon our events and programs, it's going to be difficult for us, we think, over the next 20 months, quite frankly. So any way people can support us, we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you again. If you have not voted, again, it's ticking, so you're going to have to get after it pretty quick. And if you consider us for support, thank you very much. I would just challenge all of you to maybe go visit a park you've not been to. The way you can support us is coming to visit us. So thank you if you already have, and if you haven't, we invite you out. The other thing I would ask is maybe a little bit of grace for the Metroparks as we navigate some things that keep on changing. So we're keeping up the best we can, and everybody's been very gracious and very kind as we try to figure it out along with you. But thanks for coming to hear us talk this morning.
Excellent. Well, thank you both again. Barry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank Dan and Lisa again for joining us, and appreciate. It's been a renewal for me just to hear from both of you. So thanks for taking time out of your day to be with us. But Jeremy, I think we're going to transition to breakouts. If anyone wants to share some thoughts, and others can just drop off if you need to get back to work or whatever else may be calling.
Perhaps nature, yeah.
Perhaps nature.
Get out in the sunshine while it's here today.
Exactly.
So yeah, for those who would like to hang around for breakout groups, we will get into those groups now. And